Hi, my name's Burnham and I am the photography specialist at Swoop Antarctica. Now, thanks to Antarctica's diverse wildlife and incredible landscapes, most people journeying to the White Continent are going to be taking a lot of photos. So I'm here today to share some of my top tips on how to get the most out of your photos and your camera equipment for your trip to Antarctica. The first and most obvious thing about Antarctica is that it is a very cold environment. Even in summer, temperatures are going to be hanging around the 0-degree mark. This means that your batteries are going to lose charge a lot more quickly than you're used to. So the best way to counteract this is to keep them as close to your skin as possible whilst ashore. Your body heat will hopefully keep the batteries warm and keep the charge on them longer. I also recommend bringing several more batteries than you're used to because the cold will drain them so fast. My second cold weather tip is to bring a dry bag. You may notice in Antarctica that when you go from the outside where it's cold and you take your camera inside to where it's warm, there will be a thin layer of condensation that forms on the inside of the lens. Now, this can be a real pain for photographers because that thin layer of condensation can stay for quite some time. So the best way to counteract this is to bring a dry bag. So before you come inside to your ship, place the camera in this dry bag, make sure that it's airtight, and then bring it into the ship. That way the camera will heat up much more slowly and you'll avoid that thin condensation layer. A dry bag will also protect your camera equipment during zodiac trips from spray and wet landings. My second top tip is not to get carried away with large telephoto lenses. Now, I know these lenses are the go-to for wildlife photographers, but in Antarctica, the wildlife is unafraid of humans, and this means that you're going to get very close. I tend to find myself using the landscape lenses a lot more during shore landings. This is a 16 to 35mm, particularly when shooting penguin rookeries. And even for penguin portrait shots, I rarely use anything over 200mm. The only time I'll use a longer telephoto lens is on board the ship, and if we see whales or orca in the distance, then it can be useful, but also remember it will still be very heavy. My third tip is to leave the big tripods at home. Now, unless you're shooting video or want to get seriously creative with your landscape shots, then a tripod is really not necessary in Antarctica. You'll want to be using fast shutter speeds for your wildlife photos, and for any landscape photos, the constant movement of the wildlife, the ice, and the ship means that long exposure shots don't really work. If you do want to get creative and do some time lapses or long exposure, then I suggest just bringing a small travel tripod, which will do the job nicely. One thing I will say is I tend to see a lot of people using monopods aboard the ship. Now, this is particularly useful for seabirds, for photographing whales, because your arm will get tired using these big telephoto lenses, and a monopod will just take that edge away and allow you to shoot them for longer. My fourth top tip is to show scale in your photos, because Antarctica's landscape is so incredibly wide open and dramatic that showing something that we as humans recognize, perhaps another human or a ship, will really enhance the photo and show just how enormous the landscape of Antarctica really is. As you can see in this photo, I've chosen to include the ship, just to give viewers a sense of the scale of the image. My fifth and final tip is to get low to the ground. This is particularly useful when shooting wildlife. By getting to their level, you're entering their world, and this produces a far more intimate and compelling image. As you can see in this image, I've got down to the ground to photograph these small Gentoo penguins at their level, which has given the image a sense of belonging instead of simply documenting from above. So, those are my top tips for getting the most out of your photography in Antarctica. I hope you found it useful. If you'd like any more information, then please visit our website at www.swoop-antarctica.com. Have a great trip and best of luck.